If you want to know how fast your body is actually aging, stop focusing only on your cholesterol, your blood pressure, or the number on a scale. Those markers matter, but they don't tell the full story. There is something far more revealing happening deep inside your cells, and most people have never even heard of it. It's called your telomere length, and it acts like a biological countdown clock. Every time your cells divide, that clock ticks down. And when it runs out, your cells stop repairing, your tissues begin to fail, and your body starts breaking down in ways that feel sudden, but were building for years. Now, here's what makes this even more concerning. Most people today are aging faster than they should, and they don't even realize it. You see it everywhere. People in their 30s and 40s feeling exhausted for no clear reason, recovery taking longer, energy becoming inconsistent, small health issues turning into chronic conditions earlier than expected, and it's all being dismissed as normal aging. But it's not normal. It's accelerated decline at the cellular level. And here's the part that will surprise you. There is a natural compound found in a root that has been used for over 2,000 years that modern research is now showing can actually reactivate key repair systems your body has slowly shut down with age. The question is not whether your body is capable of repairing itself. The question is whether those systems are still being activated or quietly left inactive without you even knowing it. What most people have been led to believe is that this process is fixed, that once your body starts slowing down, there is very little you can do to change it. The common assumption is that stem cell decline is inevitable, that by the time you reach your 50s or 60s, your body simply doesn't have the same capacity to repair itself, and that the only real solutions involve expensive treatments, advanced therapies, or interventions that are out of reach for most people. But that assumption is not entirely accurate. In fact, it's outdated. What recent research is beginning to show is that many of the systems responsible for repair and regeneration don't disappear with age. They become inactive, suppressed, or less efficiently triggered. Your body still has a reserve of stem cells. It still has the genetic pathways required to rebuild tissue, maintain function, and support long-term health. The issue is not absence, it's activation. And this is where the gap begins to appear between what most people believe and what is actually happening. Because when a system is inactive, it can look exactly like it's gone. You feel the effects: slower recovery, reduced energy, weaker resilience, and you assume the capability is no longer there. But in many cases, the system is still present, just not receiving the signals it needs to function at full capacity. This is why two people of the same age can have completely different outcomes. One continues to maintain strength and clarity, while the other experiences steady decline. The difference is not always genetics or luck. It often comes down to whether those internal repair systems are being consistently supported or quietly left dormant over time. I started noticing this pattern long before I fully understood it. In clinical practice, you see people every day who, on paper, look almost identical. Same age, similar lab results, comparable lifestyles, yet their bodies are moving in completely different directions. One patient remains active, recovers quickly, and maintains a level of energy that doesn't match their age. Another begins to decline, slower healing, more fatigue, more instability, and there's no obvious explanation for the difference. At first, it's easy to attribute this to genetics or chance, but when you see it repeatedly, you realize there's something deeper going on. That's what pushed me to start looking beyond standard markers and into the biology of cellular repair. And what I found was consistent across multiple studies and patient outcomes. The people aging better were not necessarily doing anything extreme, but they were, often without realizing it, supporting the internal systems responsible for regeneration. They were maintaining the signals that keep stem cells active, preserving the pathways that allow cells to repair and renew. The others weren't lacking effort, they were simply missing key pieces of the process. Once you begin to see aging through that lens, it stops being a mystery. It becomes a pattern. And more importantly, it becomes something you can begin to influence, rather than something you passively experience. To really understand what is happening, you have to look at the structure that determines how long your cells can continue to function, and that brings us back to telomeres. Think of telomeres as protective caps at the ends of your chromosomes. Every time a cell divides, a small portion of that cap is lost. In a healthy system, this process happens slowly, giving your cells the ability to renew themselves over time. But when telomeres become too short, the cell can no longer divide. It either stops functioning or enters a state where it remains alive but begins to release inflammatory signals that affect surrounding tissue. This is one of the key drivers behind many of the changes people associate with aging. The critical detail here is that your body does have a mechanism designed to rebuild those caps. It's an enzyme called telomerase. In early life, telomerase is active, helping maintain telomere length and supporting ongoing cellular renewal. But as you age, the activity of this enzyme becomes significantly reduced. It's not that the system disappears, it becomes less accessible, almost as if it has been turned down or locked away. As a result, the balance shifts. Instead of maintaining and repairing, your cells begin to accumulate damage faster than they can recover. This is why aging often feels like a gradual loss of resilience. The system that was designed to protect you is still there, but it is no longer operating at the level it once did. Understanding this changes how you look at the entire process, because it suggests that aging is not simply about time passing, but about whether these protective mechanisms are active or not. This is where the conversation takes a turn that most people are not expecting, because if that repair system still exists, the next logical question is whether it can be reactivated. And this is where a specific plant enters the picture, one that has been used for centuries in traditional medicine, but is only now being understood through the lens of modern science. The herb is called Astragalus membranaceus, a root that has been used for over 2,000 years in Eastern medicine to support what was historically described as vitality and resilience. At the time, practitioners didn't have the language of telomeres or stem cells, but what they were observing aligns closely with what current research is beginning to confirm. Inside this root are several active compounds that interact directly with the biological pathways we've been discussing. Instead of acting as a general health booster, these compounds appear to influence very specific mechanisms tied to cellular repair. What makes this particularly interesting is not just its long history of use, but the growing number of studies that are now documenting measurable effects on cellular markers associated with aging. For many people, the idea that a simple root could influence something as complex as cellular regeneration sounds unlikely. But when you begin to look at the mechanisms involved, it becomes clear that this is not about a single effect. It is about how multiple pathways can be influenced at once, creating conditions that allow your body's existing repair systems to function more effectively again. To understand why this root has drawn so much attention in recent years, you have to look at how it interacts with the specific mechanisms that control cellular aging. One of the key compounds found in astragalus is known to influence the activation of telomerase, the enzyme responsible for maintaining and rebuilding telomeres. In simple terms, it helps turn back on a system that has been gradually reduced over time. When telomerase activity increases, it supports the stabilization of those protective caps on your chromosomes, allowing cells to continue dividing and functioning longer than they otherwise would. But that is only one part of the picture. Other compounds in this root affect your stem cells more directly. They interact with signaling pathways inside the bone marrow that influence how stem cells produce energy and whether they remain dormant or become active. When these pathways are supported, stem cells are more likely to enter circulation and contribute to repair, rather than staying inactive. There is also an important effect on cellular stress and inflammation. As cells age, they are more likely to enter a dysfunctional state where they stop repairing and begin releasing inflammatory signals. Certain components of this herb appear to reduce that transition, helping maintain a healthier cellular environment where repair can continue more efficiently. Finally, it influences the balance of your immune system, which plays a central role in regulating how your body responds to damage. When you look at these mechanisms together, what you see is not a single isolated effect, but a coordinated influence across multiple systems that all contribute to how your body maintains itself over time. Beyond those primary mechanisms, there is another layer that helps explain why the effects of this herb appear more consistent when used correctly over time, and that has to do with how it supports the internal environment that stem cells depend on. Stem cells do not operate in isolation. They are influenced by the conditions around them, particularly the state of your mitochondria, the energy-producing structures inside each cell. When mitochondrial function declines, stem cells lose the energy required to divide, migrate, and repair tissue effectively. Certain compounds in astragalus have been shown to activate pathways that improve mitochondrial efficiency, allowing cells to generate more usable energy. This matters because energy availability directly determines whether a stem cell remains passive or becomes active. In addition to this, the herb appears to help regulate oxidative stress, which is one of the main factors that damages both telomeres and stem cells over time. By reducing that stress, it creates a more stable environment for repair processes to occur. There is also evidence suggesting that it helps maintain the expression of key genes that keep stem cells in a flexible, regenerative state, rather than pushing them prematurely into specialization, where they lose their ability to adapt to different repair needs. When you combine improved energy production, reduced cellular stress, and preserved regenerative capacity, you begin to see why the overall effect is not just about one pathway being activated. It is about restoring balance across multiple systems that all contribute to how efficiently your body can repair itself. At this point, the question naturally becomes whether these effects are just theoretical or if they have actually been observed under controlled conditions, and this is where the research becomes particularly important. Several studies from independent institutions have examined how compounds derived from astragalus affect biological markers associated with aging, and the results are difficult to ignore. In controlled trials involving middle-aged and older adults, supplementation with standardized extracts has been associated with measurable changes in telomere length, particularly in the shortest and most vulnerable segments, which are the ones most closely linked to cellular decline. In other studies, researchers observed increased activity in pathways related to cellular repair and energy production, along with improvements in immune system balance. There are also experimental models showing that stem cell populations recover more quickly under conditions of stress when these compounds are present, suggesting a direct role in supporting regeneration. What makes these findings significant is not just that changes were observed, but that they were consistent across different types of studies and biological systems. This reduces the likelihood that the effects are random or isolated. Instead, it points to a pattern where multiple aspects of cellular function are being influenced at once. For someone looking at this from a practical perspective, the takeaway is not that this is a miracle solution, but that there is credible evidence showing that certain natural compounds can interact with the very systems that determine how your body repairs and maintains itself over time. Once you understand the mechanisms and the supporting research, the next step is applying this in a way that actually works in real life, and this is where most people get it wrong. It's not just about taking a supplement or trying something once and expecting results. The effect comes from consistent, structured use that aligns with how your body processes these compounds. One of the most effective ways to incorporate astragalus is through a daily routine that combines both traditional and modern approaches. Using the whole root in the form of a tea allows you to extract water-soluble compounds that support immune balance and cellular protection. At the same time, a standardized extract can provide a more concentrated dose of the key active compounds responsible for telomerase activation and stem cell signaling. Timing also matters. Taking it earlier in the day tends to align better with your natural hormonal rhythms, supporting energy and immune activity without interfering with sleep. In addition to the herb itself, combining it with specific foods can amplify its effects. Nutrient-rich foods that support mitochondrial function and reduce inflammation create an environment where stem cells are more likely to remain active. This is not about adding complexity, but about creating a system where each component reinforces the others. When done correctly, this approach becomes part of a daily pattern rather than a temporary intervention. And that consistency is what allows the biological changes to build over time, rather than fading before they have a chance to take hold. Even when everything is in place, there are a few critical mistakes that can completely limit the effectiveness of this approach, and most people make them without realizing it. The first is inconsistency. This is not a short-term intervention where you try something for a few days and expect measurable change. The biological processes involve telomere maintenance, stem cell activation, cellular repair operate over weeks and months. When use is irregular, the signals become inconsistent, and the body never fully adapts. The second mistake is relying only on isolated compounds while ignoring the broader context. Many people look for a single active ingredient and overlook the importance of the full plant matrix, where multiple compounds work together to support different aspects of cellular function. When you remove that complexity, the overall effect is often reduced. Another common issue is expecting immediate, noticeable feedback. Unlike a stimulant or a pain reliever, these changes happen at a deeper level. You may not feel telomeres stabilizing or stem cells mobilizing, but that does not mean the process is not occurring. Finally, many people try to use something like this as a shortcut while ignoring the foundation. Poor sleep, high stress, and a diet built around processed foods create an environment that actively works against cellular repair. No single intervention can fully compensate for that. These factors don't just influence the outcome, they determine whether the system you are trying to support can function at all.